Hey, Pamela, you're sideways.
Am I sideways? Hold on. All right. Am I better?
That is better. Thank you.
I try to blur out my background. Can't really figure that out on my phone.
It's fine. I know you're in the car, and thank you for agreeing to be here. But you know,
Oh,
hey,
no
you
worries.
don't have to.
No worries. You got me something to do for tonight other than just going to Padres game.
All right. We will waiting on meeting to start. We have 3 minutes, and then we'll be on.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Thank you.
You doing masks at City Hall again? Okay.
It's a habit.
Yeah, we float in between, and there's no.
When I'm in the public areas, I put it on.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Good evening.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, how's the audio on my side? I'm outside somewhere at a secret location.
No problem. Can hear you perfectly.
Excellent. Behind the senior center at Beckner Shelter.
Now it's not secret.
Not anymore. Yeah, the Lions installation ceremony is tonight.
Oh, very nice. All right, if we're all ready, it's 5:30. Be mindful of everyone's time. We'll go ahead and call the San Bruno City Council special meeting of July the 6th, 2021 to order. If we could do roll call, please.
Councilmember Hamilton.
Here.
Councilmember Mason.
Here.
Councilmember Salazar.
Here.
Vice Mayor Marty Medina.
Here.
Mayor Rico Medina.
Here. Now we'll move on to item 3, public comments for items not on the agenda. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak on items that are not on the agenda and on this particular meeting is the RHNA numbers? Seeing no hands up, we'll go ahead and move on to the study. Rise the city manager to forward an opposition letter regarding the city of San Bruno's final draft regional housing needs allocation, 6th allocation. City manager.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council, Javon Grogan, City Manager. I will be joined in this presentation and discussion by Pamela Wu, our Community and Economic Development Director, who is here for any questions you may have. We'll keep this really quick. You guys, I know you guys are all familiar with RHNA and the RHNA process, but I just wanted to pull up. We last talked about this on March 23rd, but I wanted to pull up a little background that you guys received in January of this year. I know a number of months have passed, but I just wanted to recap it really quick and for the viewing public. So what are we talking about? We're talking about RHNA, which is the Regional Housing Needs Allocation. And since 1929, the state law has mandated that all cities and counties accommodate their fair share of the regional housing need through housing element updates. So this process is administered by the California Department of Housing and Community Development, and the region or the entity in our region that is responsible for processing and doing a lot of the analysis for our RHNA allocation is what's called ABAG, or the Association of Bay Area Governments. And the RHNA allocation in each jurisdiction really comes in 4 income categories: very low, low, moderate, and above moderate. The percentages of AMI are there. AMI is area median income. And so the area median income for San Mateo County is 143,000. So the various percentages of that are how that's derived. So very low being 50% of AMI. So jurisdictions like the city of San Bruno that have land use powers have the responsibility to accommodate their fair share through their housing element and through your zoning decisions. Private development, of course, builds, right? We as cities do not build, but we have the responsibility to accommodate. And increasingly, even in this state legislative session, there are conversations around how to ensure that housing is built, but we all know municipalities are not the builders of housing. We are the approvers, and we outline the format for housing through our housing element, through our general plan, and our other zoning decisions. And so the RHNA 5, as it's called, the current RHNA cycle, allocated 1,155 units to the city of San Bruno that must be completed by December 2022. Now we've allocated enough room for that, but there has not been those housing units built. And so at this time, as of the end of 2020, there had only been 203 units constructed. The next housing element cycle, which is commonly referred to as RHNA 6, covers the period of 2023 through 2031. And it needs to be certified by the state HCD department on or before January 2023. And we're behind in meeting our obligation. However, we remain compliant because we do have a compliant housing element. So this is the overall process. I know that we have lived this, and this is from a presentation that you received in January, but we are here where that red circle is. When we last met, we were 2 spots up above, but we're at the appeal process and needing to decide the path forward and do we appeal our allocation. And so just a little bit more on the RHNA 5 process. This is the RHNA 5 process. We've updated this to reflect 2020. So the last time you saw this chart was in January, and we did not have all of the 2020 figures, and you did receive it in a table in March, but you have not received it in this format. So there have been another 35 units constructed in 2020, and that brings us to that 203 units. Of our remaining 1,155 units, there is just under or just over 950, so 952. Important note that we don't build housing again, so this does not include developments that we have approved, but have not yet been started by the property owner or developer. So that includes the 427 units at Mills Park, that includes the Skyline single-family homes, I believe 40 single-family homes at Skyline, 30 ADUs. And then in 2021, there are anticipated approvals for Linview Terrace at 29 units, 22 townhomes on El Camino Real, and there are every year various ADUs and single-family homes. It also doesn't include other things that are in our development pipeline, like the Crestmore High School project that is under contract to be purchased by D.R. Horton, or the Pulte Homes project at Ingall. Those are not scheduled to be approved in 2022, but they are in our development pipeline. So the RHNA 6 allocation, you have it there on the screen. So in the very low category, 704, low income 405, moderate income 573, above moderate 1,483, bringing us to a total allocation now of 365 units. There are a few things to note, and I know the City Council knows this, but we wanted to just highlight the two areas again. One, through the Plan Bay Area process, Plan Bay Area process, there is new housing units that have been shifted to areas with projected job growth and transit rich. We do fit that definition of a transit rich community. As we all know, 101, 280, 380, BART, Caltrain, high capacity bus route along El Camino Real, right next to SFO. We are probably as transit rich as it gets in the peninsula. So housing units have been shifted toward transit-rich communities, which we know that we have in part celebrated through the Transit Corridors Plan and centering new housing growth within close proximity to our BART and our Caltrain stations. They also implemented a public land strategy that for us really addressed aging shopping malls. And there were additional units allocated to the city due to the space and the redevelopment potential at both Tan Fran and Town Center. And so that accounts for a significant portion of the increase, and that is shown here in this table. So when you look at our RHNA 5 to our RHNA 6 allocation, on total, there's an additional 2,000 units. Or what amounts to in percentages a 174% increase in our housing allocation. So units, of course, that we do not build, but the state through their final adoption will be asking us to plan for and include within our housing element. And so that concludes the presentation. Just as an overview, and I'll stop screen sharing. And so the City Council and the public has within your packet staff's recommendation as the form of an opposition letter. This is an opposition letter to the RHNA 6 allocation. However, it stops short of a full appeal. And it stops short of a full appeal for a number of reasons. The main one being to preserve precious taxpayer dollars. We estimate that the appeals process will cost $50,000, and its likelihood of success is not significant. And so we want to preserve our dollars, but also state our opposition, and that's noted here in the letter on a number of different points. The main few points being, one, we feel that in looking at Town Center and Tan Fran, ABAG did not take into account both the noise contours and the FAA height limit in the units that they allocated to those areas. Now, we did address that, and the letter talks about, we did address that on a number of occasions with ABAG staff. And what they have said is ABAG's role is to allocate a community's fair share of the regional housing need. And they clarified that cities and counties have a choice. If a specific parcel that they've identified cannot accommodate that growth, you can plan for that growth elsewhere. And in a few of their public meetings, There was a number of communities that rose an objection to this earlier on in the process, San Francisco being one. And ABAG's reply was such that, well, you can plan for it elsewhere. That works in large communities. It does not work in smaller communities like ours. And so we are asking them to take a look at the methodology that they use, consider the additional information that we have denoted in the letter. But key, we're also asking for their support. San Bruno, as it says in the letter, is not a not in my backyard community. We're not an NIMBY community. Through the communities and the city council's action, you've actually intensified residential uses near transit and truly bought into livable, working, transit-oriented development and took off density caps. And so we are one of those rare communities that has actually gone through that intensive public education outreach to really have a conversation of there's a regional housing need, we have to build more housing, where are we gonna build and let's plan for it. And what we're saying through the letter is recognize that, but recognize that there are also constraints. And we are also asking for their support with regard to Tan Fran and Town Center, because it is not necessarily a clear path to develop housing there on either of those sites. And there are regulatory hurdles both at the FAA level as well as at the Caltrans level. So that concludes the brief comments that I wanted to make. You guys all have the letter. It's a 3-page or 2.1 pages of a letter that articulates our why we're deciding to object, but stop short of an appeal. Again, Pamela Wu, our director, is available for any questions. She has graciously agreed and wanted to be here if you guys had any questions. She's looking forward to getting to the baseball game. So, thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Any members of the public that wish to speak, now is the time to raise your hand, and we will go ahead and have the city clerk call upon you.
Yes, Paul Wapinski.
Good evening, can you hear me?
Yes.
I think San Bruno's lost its small town charm. It's becoming a crowded city that looks just like every other one that links San Francisco to San Jose. I looked at the ABAG website and I don't see any legal authority that they have to force us to comply with this. It says help, assist in planning, etc., not forcing housing on us. Where's San Bruno's sovereignty in deciding how many housing units we want to have? And as the city manager stated, we have gone, I think, over and above to make that happen. The draft letter kind of perplexes me is, we're not going to file a final protest because we don't want to spend money fighting this, but we're going to write a 6-page strongly worded letter in opposition, and that's not going to make them change. What's this going to do? Why don't we partner with the city of Larkspur, Corte Madera, and Sausalito who have appealed? Let's get with South San Francisco, Millbrae, Burlingame, San Mateo, Belmont, et al., and tell them no. I'll save the consultant's fee and write the letter with 1-word sentences. So we're not going to accept the increase. We've done enough. Where are we supposed to put all this housing? There's not a lot of open space left in San Bruno. Are we going to rezone like the federal government is proposing, where they're going to have multifamily units where single family home lots used to be? If you drive southbound in El Camino from South San Francisco to Belmont, all you see is massive apartment buildings. How many do we need? I don't see any in Hillsborough. I wonder why that is. Who's going to pay for all the associated costs that come with this? 10% increase in housing, that means 10% more police, firefighters, fire trucks, police cars, city staff, natural resources. Where are we going to get to all the water we need where we don't have it, water right now? And like the city manager says, the government's not going to build this housing. Some guy's got to go dig into his wallet and do a cost benefit analysis to decide if they want to risk the money. 15% of that profit's lost right away because it's forced low income housing. He's got to charge less money for, construction material, union labor, permitting costs, and transportation costs. 5 years down the line, when all this comes ahead, may not be profitable for them. Not to mention, we've got rent control and, what the government just did during COVID, where they're not, you can't get the rent money from people because of the pandemic. And then it's kind of interesting that nobody brings up how cramming more people squares with the green plans that everybody's pushing. This increase is incongruent with it. Did anybody do a carbon footprint analysis of this? I doubt it. I think the all the extra trucks driving down the road from the garbage company that goes down to Hollister 90 miles to dump their green garbage loads is going to burn a lot of carbon. Where are we going to get the electricity for people's computers and their electric cars? The state just asked people to avoid charging their cars after 6 p.m. because we don't have the electrical capacity. If the environment's so important as people say, then ABAG should be for zero or negative growth, population growth. Shouldn't we be planting trees instead of foundations? Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other hands up from the public, we're going to bring it to the council at this time. And then I wanted to ask the city manager if you wanted to have any comments before opening up to my colleagues.
No, thank you, Council.
Okay, colleagues, comments, questions? Councilmember Mason, please.
Thank you. I did want to ask, what are the repercussions for not meeting the RHNA requirements?
Why don't I turn that to our director, Pamela?
Sure. Sure. Good evening, Councilmember Mason. So if the city does not meet its obligation, then we're at the risk of losing the housing element being certified. And if that's the case, every developer can't come in and claim SB 35 development. As council remembers, the development will come in ministerially approved without any council's approval. And also we don't qualify for any federal or state grants for any housing production. It is important to know that a city wants to maintain a compliant housing element. And by doing so, then you are showing good faith effort how to fulfill the obligation to produce these housing numbers.
If I can expand upon that answer, the director is exactly right. I just want to make it clear that we're talking about the effort to plan for the housing. There are currently no repercussions on cities if the housing is not actually built, because again, we don't build housing. There are legislative conversations around how to ensure that the housing is built or have a more streamlined approval process that may even jump local control. And so it's important that we do our part and plan for the housing based on the needs allocation because of everything that the director said.
And SB 35, if I remember correctly, also allows for taller buildings and more density with local oversight, if I remember correctly.
Councilmember Mason, so the SB 35 has evolved. It started with taller, more dense, and less parking. But the primary focus is to take away the discretionary review and makes it as easy as possible, as streamlined as possible. You might be correct that there might be more additional flexibility that has been given this year.
Thank you. I think, so I would just say that, I think these are changes for San Bruno, and as more local controls being taken away, it's important that we follow the League of California Cities, which have been huge advocates of maintaining local control. With that said, I did want to ask the city manager if there was an appetite for changing at least the title, because I think part of the position is how real it is that was built. And so I would suggest that instead of starting it with kind of on a negative footing, maybe naming it request for assistance in meeting the San Bruno RHNA 6 allocation. And then the first sentence, this is just how I wrote it down, but the city of San Bruno wishes to express its deep concern over its ability to meet RHNA 6 allocation and request support at this time for resources equal to the percentages of resources increases that it has been assigned. but something more along the lines of really an opening to saying, hey, we understand that cities are being allocated these, and we were allocated this huge percentage, and we need your help to accomplish it. And that's can open it up for discussion, but that was really the main.
Okay, thank you. And city manager, we're going to go to the vice mayor next. We did have one member of the public, and I think there's got to be maybe a little help in the sense of it's believing that ABAG, we can just tell ABAG no, but this goes higher, right? This is a state. This is beyond us, and the Councilmember Mason brought up the example of the Mills Park project was going to be, if my memory is correct, 7 stories, 600 units under the 35 as was indicated. So that's just to give you an example, and we would have had nothing that we could have said or done about it. But city manager, because there was a lot of statements made about just say no and tell ABAG no and et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. If there was a way to say no, the no would actually result in worse outcomes for the city and likely eventually strip away the city council's discretion to approve. And so, as the director said, if we do not comply with the housing element, the state can enact penalties where we will not have a valid housing element that eventually may take away discretionary powers that the city council has in approving development. And developers can absolutely will be able to more effectively utilize the SB 35 process, which is a more streamlined approval process. And developers through that process have the option to waive certain city requirements or get relief from certain city requirements, heightened density being 2 examples. And so, Mayor, you're absolutely right. Should the Mills Park developers have pursued an SB 35 project, the initial plans that we were showed was a taller building that had more units, and I think the 600 number is right. It was I think a little under 650 units that they were proposing under an SB 35. And the final negotiated number for that.
Thank you. We'll go. Thank you. We're going to go to Vice Mayor Medina, then we'll go to Council Member.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Medina. So I just wanted to, first, there were a lot of questions from Mr. Lipinski. I think we should try to answer those that we can and acknowledge the number of them. The very first one is the legal, what legal authority, and I was hoping that staff could answer that. I believe it's in the letter, but maybe not everyone has access to that letter. And if we could try to answer as many questions that were brought up, that would be beneficial, or at least acknowledge them and get back to Mr. Lipinski at a later time.
Sure. So I think we've addressed most of those through the questions from Councilmember Mason and Medina, but Director Wu, can you go through one more time the process and the housing element and the penalties?
Sure, gladly. Vice Mayor Medina, so to kind of take a step back, ABAG, as mentioned, put together a total number of the housing unit for the entire region of California. Then they subdivided into different sub-regions, if you will, Northern California, Central California, or the Southern California region. ABAG puts together a draft allocation for each jurisdiction to meet that number, and that final draft is what we're appealing to, or expressing strong opposition will be adopted by the state HCD, Housing Community Development Department, as our final RHNA allocation. In terms of the legality, ABAG makes the recommendation, but the state agency will impose that on local jurisdiction as the final number. And also it's important to know that the final overall region-wide housing numbers will not change. So if, say, the city of San Bruno wishes to proceed with a formal appeal and we get lucky that our numbers drop down, somebody else's number is going to go up. It's not the overall housing production is going to go down. It's each individual city's number may shift.
Got that, understood. So perhaps after this meeting's over, we can go back to the recording and actually get a number of other questions answered. I don't want to take too much staff time on that currently. But for instance, like making sure we have enough water, and we do water studies. We're making sure that the sewer has the capacity. For each project, we do sewer studies. And so I just wanted to acknowledge the question. And the biggest part that I think that I hear from people is when they ask the question, they don't get an answer, then they're figuring why even bother showing up. So I'm moving forward. I acknowledge the strategy here that staff has met with ABAG staff and has gone over these numbers, and given that we do have a transit corridor plan, that Tan Fran is underneath the airport takeoff area. There's noise issues. And I think the biggest part in the letter is asking for assistance.
Okay.
We just went through the budget and we are severely challenged with making sure that we can pay for the basic necessities of our city. And I think the letter does address the request for assistance. But I guess my question for staff now is, so what steps are we going to put together? What needs to happen at Tan Fran, and what time frame is that to get the housing numbers into a stage to where the state is like, okay, that housing element, those numbers seem reasonable. How we're going to pay for it, how long is it going to take, how big of an area are we looking at? So this is at a very high level, and I'm just interested in hearing what is our path forward.
So with regard to specific parcels like Tan Fran, we should pause on that question because we will be addressing specific parcels and Tan Fran and what the future of Tan Fran is at a later time. I think with regard to the other part of the question, which is what is the next step in compliance for our housing element, I'll turn that over to the director.
Sure. Vice Mayor, so we have been engaging both ABAG and also HCD staff asking for help. We've had a number of virtual meetings and a number of email exchange. HCD is very sympathetic to our situation, knowing that there is a SFO flight path and noise contour, there's the restriction. However, they're also sympathetic to the overall housing strategy that ABAG staff has put together. If you all, I mean, they're kind of caught in between, but they definitely understand. So the next step is for staff to continue to work with HCD to possibly come up with a solution, and then also working together on the long range plan for Tan Fran.
So what time frame are we looking at? Maybe you can help me and perhaps the public understand, like, this is a lengthier process. Currently, we get the numbers of housing that we're required to provide, and then we get the plan together and we start looking at what the next steps are, which are rezoning,
So
upzoning, right?
Yeah, I'm sorry. So if our final draft allocation remains the same, which is around 3,000 units or so, and we're looking at possibility of redo 10 Fran, we're looking at general plan amendment. We're looking at possibly introducing a new specific plan and also amending the plan development permit and also do a sequence analysis. And we don't know how many housing units that the site can accommodate, but throughout the process, and you're looking at roughly, I wouldn't say this is a fast process, somewhere between 5 to 10 years to really know. I mean, the study process will probably take anywhere from a year to 18 months. But you really won't know how many housing units 10 Fran and also possibly the town center can accommodate.
But again, I think it's important that we not talk about specific parcels, and it's important to clarify that the RHNA numbers does not mean that we have to provide that housing. It means that we have to plan for it in our housing element, and so that's the language is critical. And so we will be updating our housing element, and that's the process by which we're going to plan for it. How that could be accommodated on individual parcels, whether we're talking Tan Fran, town center, or other vacant parcels, or even occupied parcels, is a whole separate discussion. And each parcel has its own regulatory approval process to allow additional housing. On some parcels, it may be allowed. Tan Fran is an example where there's a various set of specific plan and other approvals that have to be changed to actually accommodate for the additional housing. But our requirement is to update our housing element, and that's what we will begin working on once the numbers are finalized.
Understood. I have one final question. So I don't remember how many units were identified in the transit corridor plan. I believe it was 3,000 or 4,500. Does the staff recall that number? That would the total anticipated number of additional units that would be provided if we fully implemented the transit corridor plan. Do the staff recall that number?
I'm sorry, I don't have that number handy with me, but I can definitely look it up and provide that back to you.
That would just be good to kind of like to give us a ballpark, like, well, if it's whatever it is, but anyhow, my questions are done for the time being. Thank you.
Councilmember Hamilton.
So most of what I wanted to get at has been covered, so thank you. I have one question and then some comments. Is there any history of ABAG and HCD being successful in negotiating, for example, with the Airport Land Use Commission or whatever to get these types of restrictions relaxed? I'm just wondering if we're, if there's any precedent that's been set that we can look toward.
I can chime in a little bit. I have reached out to a legal counsel and asking the same question. So if you have been following the news in Southern California, a number of jurisdictions have filed an appeal, but only a handful have won their appeal and got a readjustment of their final RHNA allocation draft number. And I'm talking about a small adjustment of their previous RHNA allocation. So it is not all impossible, but it is a handful of jurisdiction that has won that battle.
So I wasn't actually talking about trying to win an appeal, because we're not even going to try. We're not going to try to appeal. What I was talking about is, okay, now we have this big number and we need to meet it, but if, for example, we wouldn't be able to put as much housing in, under the flight path that they want us to because of current restrictions, and we're asking for their help in dealing with the Land Use Commission and other agencies to help us do that. I was asking about is there any track record of success for ABAG or HCD in helping communities in that area?
I don't know if there's a successful track record, but so when we're talking to HCD staff and also ABAC staff, South City has over write SFO, ALUCP in the past. And so that is a possibility that we could continue to push and possibly amend the ALUCP for SFO so that this noise contour and also the housing non-compatible component can be lifted outside out of the SFO ALUCP itself. So that's a possibility.
Okay.
Yeah. And if I can expound upon that, through this letter, what we're really asking for is support, and support can come in two ways, active or passive, right? We don't know if there's a track record of ABAG, which is a regional planning agency, engaging. Passive support could be if we are looking to allocate additional units to a specific parcel, we may ask for a letter of support from ABAG and ACD, right? In furtherance of us meeting their allocations. Active support could actually be them engaging as an agency to help us and other jurisdictions. While we don't know that has occurred, we will certainly be looking for both passive and active support.
Okay, great. I'm very supportive of that. And I want to echo and support Councilmember Mason's suggestion about reframing the beginning of the letter, because I'll be honest, when I was reading the letter, in reading all of it, I thought we were appealing until we got to the end. So I think it kind of buries the lead, and it does kind of set it off on a negative tone. And even though we're not NIMBYs, kind of rang a little hollow because I hadn't gotten to the point where we said, okay, we're not going to appeal. So I think that Councilmember Mason's suggestions were good ones, in kind of reframing it as, okay, we're accepting that this is going to happen. We do want to voice our opposition to how we got here, but now that we are here, we're going to need help. So I'm supportive of her suggestions in that area, and I'm also supportive of not appealing, because the odds of success are slim. And at the end of the day, we all know that we need housing. It's just a matter of how we get there. So my last comment, it was already on my list, and Mr. Rapinski touched on it as well. I have a huge problem with the fact that the allocation process says nothing about water. There's nothing whatsoever anywhere in it that has anything to do with where are we going to get water for all these new units. So I think that's a huge miss, and something that they're going to need to have to address at some point, because we're going to be having less and less water to go around, not more, going forward. So those are the end of my comments. Thank you.
Councilmember Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My only comment is that, without having a specific request in the letter, it almost seems to me to be not really worth sending at all. I mean, we're not appealing, we're accepting what we're getting. The request is very non-specific. I don't know what we're asking for. I don't know what the intended outcome is. As far as I know and how things work, ABAG has no role other than doing the allocation, and then they're sort of done. CCAG does the approvals for the land use. As far as I've seen in my time on the CCAG board, very few cities ever get turned down for sort of bypassing what the airport says, and so they build. A lot of times they have to take on the risk. They agree to take on the risk, and then they get approved so they can build. So if staff believes that we can work with this number, I don't agree with the assumptions that the state makes, nor the assumptions that ABAG made in doing their allocations, but those numbers are what they are. We're not going to fight them. So, I don't see the purpose of sending the letter unless we're specifically going to ask for something other than just saying, we expect help in the future, and not even quantifying what that help might be. So I don't think it hurts to send it, but I just don't understand what the outcome is expected to be.
Thank you, Councilmember. City Manager, any comments to what you've heard through the colleagues?
Well, in response to Councilmember Salazar's statement about a specific request for support, that specific request would likely come related to town center and or TanFran, and just unfortunately in timing, we're not there for a specific ask. We do not have an active process to update the specific plan. We know that there are current ownership conversations happening with TanFran, and we are engaged with those, but we are not at a point where we're ready for a specific ask with TanFran. What the letter does is essentially outlines and asks for their assistance, and we will follow up once we have a specific ask for both Town Center and TanFran and potentially other areas. But we're just not at a point right now for a specific ask. But we did want to note that we would like their support, because you're absolutely right. Cities have went through the process to override the Airport Land Use Commission, and we may very well be successful like some of our neighboring jurisdictions have. But we may also hit some hurdles, and asking for a letter of support is something that we may do at that time.
And if I could ask just a follow up to that,
Please.
If since we're not appealing, and the window that we're looking at is for appeals, and this is something other than an appeal, would it make sense to just wait until we have a specific ask and then send our letter?
Staff talked about that, but we thought that it was best to get our opposition or change it to deep concern on the record. And ABAG is at a point through their appeals process where they're looking at people that appealed and questions, just entertaining more questions about their methodology. So sending the letter now, putting the city's deep concern on record made sense, which is why we wanted to do that. And I will say that in my conversation with other city managers in San Mateo County, there are other cities that are in the county that are doing the same thing, which is sending a letter of opposition, but stopping short of an appeal to really have it on the record.
Thank you.
Mayor, I think you're muted and we can't hear you.
You missed everything I just said. No, all I was going to say is we have Councilmember Mason and Vice Mayor Medina. If we can kind of wind this up, because we have a 6 o'clock that we may have people waiting for us. Councilmember Mason.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I just wanted to also comment that, when Distance Mills Park came up, I think one of the biggest surprises was that, there was the communication to the community wasn't great. I believe that it came to the Planning Commission the night that it was asked to be approved, and that was a 3-year project. So now that we are aware and we have a better understanding of really what our numbers look like, I think it would really behoove us all to start kind of a listening or educational campaign for our community to inform them of what is happening, why it's happening, why we got these numbers. Maybe invite a member from ABAG to come and represent ABAG, explaining where San Bruno is and why we got the numbers that we got. But I do think it's really important to try to get ahead of this time around, and really educate our community around the development that is really being encouraged in San Bruno and why it's being encouraged. So thank you.
Vice Mayor Medina.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm in support of writing the letter with the changes to stress our position. It's very difficult for us to meet the housing, but we're willing to partner. I think at the very end of the letter, maybe that last paragraph, and not to wordsmith too much, but to split out what our request is some partnership. And when it comes down to placing the housing in the areas where it's obviously part of the reason why our numbers are so high, that they need to step up and help us. doing nothing, I'm not in favor of. We need to make our position clear. I believe and agree that it would be costly and we would not likely have a favorable outcome, but we should be on the record that the city of San Bruno is in favor of housing. We need help to overcome the challenges that our city has with the geographical area. That here is our number is being based on a mall that's near a transit area, but we have difficulty in making that happen. So help us. That's all I have to say. So I'm in favor of this moving forward with the revisions.
Okay, so what I've heard from most was go forward, no appeal, yes, send a letter. I'm hearing okay to send it now instead of waiting for further time. There's been some suggestions brought up by Councilmember Salazar, Vice Mayor Medina, and Councilmember Mason. City Manager, do you kind of have a note of those or suggestions?
Yeah. Without going into the word changes, what I have is change the intro to express deep concern in the request of assistance, so it's up front. With respect to asking for specific assistance, my recommendation to you as a council is to not put that in there because we don't know what it is. And I can read actually the second to last paragraph that says, additionally, the city of San Bruno requests ABAG and HCD's assistance in resolving airport land use commission conflicts and opposition that we may receive from other regional, state, and federal agencies to allow housing on the sites that ABAG has identified through the RHNA 6 allocation process. Also, we request ABAG and HCD's support of the city's housing element, which will rely on new housing development in these shopping center areas. And so while we're not saying we would like a letter saying X or we would like your support for Y, what we are clearly saying is we are for housing and we intend to pursue housing in these areas. And when we get to that point, we request your assistance. And so respectfully, I think coming back at that time, when we know the specific assistance that we're looking for on those sites would be a better path. We just don't know exactly what we need from them right now, but we wanna, through this, state our deep concern on the record, but also let them know that in furtherance of developing housing on the sites that have been identified and that are the reason why our numbers have gone up, we will likely need their assistance.
Okay, thank you for the recap. I'm just going to go around the room. This is to authorize the city manager to put an opposition letter. You've heard what he's heard from us as far as the first modifications and then clarifying where it doesn't specific. It does ask for help down the road, but he's feeling to wait until we have specifics. Because if you're going to ask, they may say, well, how can we help you? We're not sure yet. So anyway, Mr. Hamilton, thoughts? I mean, yes, no?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good with what's been discussed, the changes to the beginning of the letter and how to proceed. Thank you.
Mr. Salazar?
I'm not sure what the changes to the beginning of the letter were, but I'm fine with sending what was proposed in the packet.
Councilmember Mason?
Yeah, I'm okay with the suggestions that I had made for the beginning, and then with the city manager's suggested edits.
Vice Mayor? You're on mute, Marty.
Almost got it. Yes, I'm good. We're not asking something specific, but we're almost saying that as when we get to it, we're going to need their help. So it's just a different way of saying it, but it's close enough. Thank you.
And then Javon, do you have, as Councilmember Salazar said, he wasn't 100% certain about the modifications that Councilmember Mason brought up. But do you have those, or can you recap those so that we know where, I think you did, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah, my recommendation is that we not sort of wordsmith what the precise language is. What I'm overall hearing from the city council is, instead of beginning the letter with "we'd like to express our opposition," begin the letter with language conveying "we'd like to express our deep concern with meeting the RHNA 6 allocation and request their assistance in doing so." We'll work on the precise language, but that's in summary what I'm hearing from the council.
Okay. Yes, I'm seeing most heads nodding or a thumbs up, and so you have the consensus, or at least more than a majority, that are saying to go forward with that, and you are authorized, unless there's the thought we need to have a motion. But other than that, I think we've heard from all colleagues. They've made statements clear, and I think you have the authorization. I don't think you have the authorization to go ahead and proceed.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we're going to go ahead and adjourn to the next regular city council meeting, which will be held on July 13th. But we will go from one Zoom to another, and I'll see you in a moment. Meeting adjourned.